All right, Shalom Aleichem, Parshat Kisavle, Chayelo. This is in the Kutei Sichas, Chelek Yotes. So it starts like this: "This Chayelo, the Yom Huledis from Shnei Hamaedus Hagadolim, the Baal Shem Tov Miyasis from Teres Chassidus Haklolis, and the Alter Rebbe Miyasis from Teres Chassidus Chabad is Alam Al Chal B'Smichus to Shabbos Parshas Tavei or B'Shabbos Parshas Tavei Alein. Chayelo." So what today is the day of the birth of the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of Chassidus, the general Chassidic movement, and the Alter Rebbe was the founder of Chassidus Chabad. And this day, Chai Elul, which is their birthday, it's also the day that Chia Shaleni came to the Baal Shem Tov and they studied, and then the day that the Baal Shem Tov revealed himself to be the Baal Shem Tov was also on this day. So this day always falls around Shabbos Parshas Tavei or on Shabbos Parshas Tavei. Und wie bald als alle Moede von Loschen Miyud, als man mit der speziellen Inhalt, Hashana seine Merumas ist der Parshas Atayra, was werden gelenkt in the Zmanim und welches is seine Chal. And since the Yom Tov, all Yom Tovim, he brings the Shalah. It says that a Yom Tov, the word Moyadeh from Miyud, meaning it's designated. So this holiday, this day is designated for this specific energy. It's always relevant to the parsha that it falls within, right? The hashgacha pratis of that is that we see there's a correlation. So then Darfman Zogan, we have to say, as in Parshas Tavle is Marumis, euch de Teichen von Chayelo, befragt, as wird angerufen Yom Tov und Moed ki Yedua. So we can see in Parshas Kisavle not only the connection to Chayelo, but why we call it a Yom Tov, right? This is, by the way, a fundamental sikha here. So the name von unser Sedra, was in ihr is angedeit ki Yedua, the Teichen von the ganze Sedra is Ki Savo. Says that the name of the parsha really goes into it sort of is a indicator. It indicates what the whole parsha is going to be about, right? There's a hint to what the parsha is about in the name itself. So the taich from Tavei la'aretz is la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva, und nit nur in unser parsha wo the pasuk is mafaret v'yirashta v'yeshavta ba. Nor wie Chazal sagen as umetum wo steht ki saveh chiyotz b'zeh metis la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva. So when it says ki saveh, you will enter, it's saying after they've completely inherited and settled the land, once they've inhabited the land and really planted roots, right? And the Chazal say, the sages say that anytime we see this term, that this is referencing this exact thing, that it's after this process of making roots in the land. Und wie bald ist das ist der Teich von Kisave b'chol makom, ist verstandig, es hagam lernt es ab von dem, was prat l'cha kosu be'echad mein la'achar Yerusha v'yeshiva, liegt das aber in dem Teichen von Tavei Gufa. So even though we learned it out from this particular instance in our parsha, when it says Kisave, and the explanation is that it means after they've inherited and settled the land, still we see that it represents, it's representative of the word itself, Kisave. That since anytime we see this use of this term, that it means after there's been a complete, process of making roots. Nach me Yerusha v'yeshiva, meint nicht die Yerusha v'yeshiva von dem Yachid, als nachdem wie bekommt sein Chelek in Eretz Yisrael darf bringen wie Kurim, nor nach der Yud Dalet Shana shekavshu v'chalku ganz Eretz Yisrael, und wie man hat schon einmal mevar gewähnt, dem Diuk Loshen Rashi, in Anheim von unser Sedra, Magishalein is Chayav v'Kurim ad shekavshu es ha'aretz v'chalkua. So it says that the fact that we see that it's after the Yerusha v'yeshiva, the settling and the making roots in the land, it's not just one individual. It's not on an individual level when this person does it and that person does it, that each person comes and they do this to their piece of Eretz Yisrael, but rather it's the whole land. And how do we know this? Because as people go in, the mitzvah of bringing the first fruits, which is supposed to be done when they enter the land, didn't happen until after the 14 years of conquering the land. And it's specifically, and Rashi brings this, he says specifically that it's after the bringing of the after the conquering of the land that they actually bring the first fruits. So he says, and it says, Yeshiva. So Rashi doesn't say this. Rashi doesn't actually use this, right? It says unzagnit. It doesn't say that the pasuk itself says Yeshiva after they inherited and settled the land. As the mit is Rashi magish as v'yirishu v'yashavtaba da mein kibush v'chiluk haaretz from ganz land. Was hat genommen yedal shana. So he could have just. It says it right there. It says, after they've inherited and settled the land. So why not just use that phrase, from the pasuk? No, Rashi goes and he's madgish that it means kibush v'chiluk haaretz, when they conquer and divide the land. This is when they bring the first fruits, and this is the mitzvah that is associated with entering the land for the first time. So b'meila is eich the inyan in v'yirishu v'yashavta ba lig in teichen from tavle. So it's included in the word tavle. It's naturally, we understand that when it says tavle, when you go in, when you enter, that it's associated with settling and inheriting the land. So the Bir Bezeh, the explanation on this is like this. The richtige Teich from Bia is Areinkommen in Ganze. Right? The real way to explain the word Bia, to enter, to come into, is to say to when you entered it completely, right? Areinkommen in Ganze, to completely enter. Aderech Maimon Chazal, is the Chazal say, Bia b'mitzvahs lo yishma Bia. To go in partially, you can't call it Bia, you can't call it entering. So un Eibsfeld afilu nar abyssal in the Areinkommen. Hases nit the emes shleimus from Bia. If a piece of you, just a tiny abyssal piece of you, is not inside, has not entered, and this means with Tuma, for example, entering a place of Tuma, if you're not entirely engulfed in that, then you didn't go in all the way. And then he brings another Alderach Bia b'mayim v'tar in Tvila, right? When going into the mikvah, darf doch zayin afilu aharich b'mayim, that even every last hair needs to go into the mikvah. It says that some different groups within Yiddishkeit and Judaism, they have different minhag, the women, as to their hair that goes under the sheitel or the tichel or whatever they use to cover. So in Chabad, so some people even like shave their head altogether. I think this goes maybe contrary to the Arizal and Kabbalah, but in Chabad, the women cut their hair short so that when they go into the mikveh, all the hair is for sure under the water, right? So they cut the hair short because, as he says, to really be considered as though you've entered, you have to go completely in, right? Even the last hair, right? Even the hair has to go in. So the farme tave davka la'achri rishu v'yeshiva, while noch dan is men in Ganze and Arayin in Eretz Yisrael. So when it says ki Savo, when you go into the land, it means when you've completely gone in, the whole nation, and when you've conquered and divided the land up to really like make roots, right? So Arayin in Eretz Yisrael in an oifen funes yashvas, to really go in a way of having settled there, right? Planted roots. Nachmer, mitzad the achtus von Yidden is kolzman is his nit gewinnt his yashvas von alle Yidden, was darf sein dort in Eretz Yisrael felt euch in dem Tave von jeder Yidden hagam bei ihm befragt as schein la achri yishuv yeshivta von sein chiluk, und therefore is the emes bia in Eretz Yisrael davka noch kibush v'chiluk von ganz Eretz Yisrael. It's not enough that on the individual level each person has their chiluk, like we said, right? It's not enough that a few people go in, or the majority of the people go in, and they mahapich their piece of the Eretz Yisrael, they've transformed their piece of Eretz Yisrael, but that the whole nation has to go in and completely take care of business. Und das ist eigentlich der Keshet zwischen Parshas Tavai and Chai Elul, and this is the connection between Parshas Ki Savo and the day of Chai Elul, which is today's Yom Tov. This is the Eiftu from Teres Chassidus, was is Nisgala geworden durch Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe is, as the Aveda from Teres Mitzvah soll getan werden in an Eifen from Tavoi, right? The whole point of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe bringing their Chassidus to the world was so that a person could engage in Torah mitzvahs in a way of Savo, Ki Savo, really going in, Arangen and Gansen in the Aveda, to completely become, engross oneself and really enter all the way into this Aveda, this service. Bez as es bleibt nicht, aber kein Nekuda invention, was is nicht durchgenommen mit Torah mitzvahs could kommen. It wasn't enough, because up until this point, it was enough people were just being Yotzi. It's not enough to just be Yotzi. You got to go all the way in, right? Become saturated in it, right? So in Kashem, wie in the Indian from Tavoi, Zainin Faran Svei and Yanim. And when it comes to Savoi, there's two concepts, two ideas. Aleph, the Klalas that get Indian from Tavoi, the general meaning of Tavoi, which means the Klalas that get Indian from Tavoi. Yeah, and then Beis, he's going to go into what it means. In Beis, the Pratam and Oifen, in them Tavoi, should be a Shaftaba. So the general meaning of going in all the way, but then the Pratam, the details of what that actually entails. Those are two concepts in Tavoi. Right, as we said, it says to go in. What does that mean? It means every single one of you. Everybody has to go in and break and conquer the land, then break up and divide the land amongst the people. Right. And also with Chayelo, there's two ideas here. There's two paths, two ways. Aleph, the Yom who led us from Baal Shem Tov, the Miyas from Teres Chassidus clothes. The birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, who gave us the general Chassidus, right? The Chassidic movement, as we call it. And Beis, the Yom who led us, the Yom who led us from the Alter Rebbe, the Miyaseh from Teres Chassidus Chabad, and then also the birthday of the Alter Rebbe who founded the Chabad Chassidus, which is, it's precise. It's more detailed. Okay, so was the chiluk zwischen ze is kapiskam kvei kedushas mori b'chami adma, as the Baal Shem Tov hat bewiesen wie man darf sein in the. As the Baal Shem Tov hat bewiesen wie man darf did in the Eibishtin. The Baal Shem Tov came along and said the manner in which we're supposed to serve Hashem, right? Being an Eved Elikim, being a Chassid, all of these things was the general approach to the way one is supposed to have a real relationship with Hashem. This was from the Baal Shem Tov, right? This is what it means, a klalis. Was das is bedeutung zum Inyan klali from Tavai. This is the general meaning of Tavai, to really engage with it. Und der Alter Rebbe hat bewiesen, wie kann man sein an Eved Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe taught us how. He gave us the tools to engage in this relationship with Hashem in the way that the Baal Shem Tov intended, right? It's not that the Baal Shem Tov didn't do it. Baal Shem Tov told us what we're supposed to do, and the Alter Rebbe is now telling us how we're supposed to do that. Das heißt, we are up to bringing them bepoil. He wants to make it that we can. He's telling us how to do it in action, right? He's going to explain further what that means, but he's saying the Baal Shem Tov said, "Ki Savo, go in, Tavoy," and the Alter Rebbe said what that means. Right? So that man does verstehen behagdim ha'yidua as the gili from Teres Chassidus is a achana to be as Mashiach. We have to explain. We have to preface. It's known. It says that Chassidus is the preparation for the coming of Mashiach, right? Und wie sie ist Yidua, the entfer from Mashiach zum Baal Shem Tov as look shia futzumay and secha chutza is asimar. Okay, the Baal Shem Tov used to go to the house of Mashiach, base Mashiach, and he would see, say he saw the Orach Chaim, but he says that he saw Mashiach, and he asked Mashiach, "When are you coming?" Right? Asimar, when is the master coming, Mashiach? And he says, when your teachings, your well springs will spread forth out into the world, right? So steht in Sifrei Kabbalah as bis wie es Mashiach sein in alle Geluyim in Welt, nor von Chitzoni is atik. Now, here's a little Kabbalah here. It says in Kabbalah that until Mashiach comes, the world exists in a way that is the revelation of godliness as it stems from the external aspect of the crown. the supernal crown. What does that mean? We all have the Eser spheres, the Eser koiches. And these Eser spheres, these 10 spheres that go on the 10 faculties and attributes of a person, right? Chachma, Bina, Das, Chachma being the empty space, the Koyach Ma, the Bittul, the emptiness where inspiration can enter. And then from there, those sparks, that thought goes into Bina, and Bina is the width, the length, and the depth of the concept to really expand that idea. Then Das, which goes, down and then, to become one with. So now that you've got this idea and now you've examined it, now you can sort of embed it into your way of being. And then that goes down to chesed. Chesed is kindness or giving, and gevura is discernment, right? So you have all of these different pathways and these different energies. And so Keser is above all of that. The crown is above the whole system. And in the crown, there's two levels of the crown. There's arich, which is the will, and there's atik, which is associated with the delight. The delight that is the motivator for the will, right? So the will, we're not talking, that's arich. But within atik itself, within the divine delight, there's two aspects. There's the delight within itself, the delight as it exists for itself. And then there's the delight as it exists and transfers the energy to the will. Hey, there's a delight over here. So now here's the will to create the thing which then, continues or enhances that delight. So there's two aspects of the delight, of Atik, the crown. So we'll go into that a little bit. And when Mashiach comes, the world will exist in a way that is a revelation of godly energy as it stems from the inner aspect of the crown, right? So a completely different level here. And we're going to say this, it sounds like it's very close, but it's a world apart, and you'll see. We say that a preparation for something has within it a glimmer of what it's being a preparation for. So I grew up in a family of musicians, and in music, you say, right, you rehearse and you practice before the performance. The rehearsal and the practice itself is the playing of the music, which is going to be performed, right? So within the preparation, you see the glimmer of what the end result is going to be. Right, so we can apply that. So darf mitzagen, we have to say, as the Eiftu from Chassidus is the inyan from Pnimius and Avedis ha'adam b'terer mitzvahs. And therefore, as Chassidus mamshich the Pnimius from Elakus, Pnimius atik. So since Chassidus is the preparation for the coming of Mashiach, and when Mashiach comes, the revelation within this world, the reality will be one as it exists and stems from the inner aspect of the crown. Then if Chassidus is the way to that point, then we have to say that within Chassidus itself, there is a glimmer of the Pnimius Atik, the inner aspect of the crown, of the delight, the divine delight. So the chiluk between Pnimius and Chitzonius and Pashtus, by a mention, we can explain the idea, the difference between the outer aspect and the inner aspect as it pertains by looking at ourselves, right? This says, Pnimius main, wie the mensch is la'atzmai in Chitzonius, the difference is that Pnimius, the inner aspect, is a person as they are to themselves, right? You know yourself. That aspect of you as you exist only you, for you and with you, that's Pnimius. But as it pertains to somebody else or needing to interact, that's Chitzonius, that's external. It's superficial in comparison to the inner aspect, right? Because it's being limited and formed into something as it pertains to something else outside of itself, right? So the nafkamina zwischen Zeh and Avedis ha'adam, and the distinction over here as it pertains to, the service of mankind to serve Hashem, when a mensch tut a Zach nor mit sein Chitzonius, is nicht reingetan in dem mit sein ganzen Etzem und Pnimius, nor bloß mit sein Chitzonius. Und in dem Gufa nor de Madrega in ihm, was hat Scheich ist zu ihnen, was ist gut ihm. Und therefore bleibt und the Zach, was tut, zweibas unter der Sache. When a person engages in something with the external aspect of themselves, essentially, they're engaging with this thing as though it is something that exists outside of themselves, which makes sense. And so therefore, no matter what they do, the thing that they're doing and the person themselves will always remain two separate things, right? But b'shas aber a mensch tut mit sein pnimius, when a person does something, engages in something with their depth, with their inner aspect of themselves, is that a reingetan in them. It's coming from within themselves, right? Varam vibal azutzad zayin pnimius is nita kein art for epis was is chutz in kum b'meila ois as tuendike zach afilu a pratisdike mit sein pnimius und etzem verte zach vereinzig mit in wie ein mitzias. When a person engages in something with their inner aspect of themselves, where there's no the part of themselves that doesn't engage with anything outside of themselves. That means it's only internal. So if you're engaging with something, even though it's outside of oneself, but you're doing so with the piece of you that is specific and special for just your internal self-work, then you unite that thing with yourself. You become one with the thing you're engaging with on the level of pnimius. And we see that when you do something with meaning, you do something though as though you mean it and you want it, you're connected to it in a way that it's like you're one with that thing. You become united to it. You know, it's the difference between something that somebody does and something that somebody is, right? So das is euch the Eiftu von Gilui Chassidus, and this is also the effect that Chassidus had. Chassidus ubechlaus pnimius atayra was very angerufen nishmasa da reisa. Chassidus, and by extension, all of Pnimius HaTorah, the inner dimensions of Torah, is referred to as the soul of the Torah. Just like halacha is the body of Torah, right? We see how we're supposed to, actually, fulfill the mitzvahs and different things like that, and follow halacha. The Chassidus and Pnimius HaTorah, the inner dimensions, is considered the neshama of the Torah. So is Megalit and Nakuda as a chayis. When a Yidin in Ale and Yonitari mitzvahs, it's the chayas, it's the neshama and the soul, the life of the Yid, which is Torah mitzvahs. Was the Tchune von chayas is as das veret vereinzig mit the zach was balebt. What is a neshama, right? A chayas, life becomes one and united with the thing it's giving life to, right? Chayas is nit meisiv kein naye prate in the zach was balebt, right? Life doesn't give something additional to the thing that it's giving life to. It becomes one with that thing, and now it has life. That thing now has life. It's one, right? He gives an example in a guf chai zayne nit varan merere varim vi in a guf meis. You don't see in a body that's alive. You don't see more organs than you would in a body that's not alive. And I mentioned before, as long as we're making these correlations, we can see that the neshama of the Torah and the neshama of the person, and we're going to connect these two ideas here, right? So chayes b'poil is nit kein besondere Zach von dem was belebt, nor das ist the neshama von dem Guf, right? Von dem belebt. Jede nekuda von Guf is a lebedik nekuda. So the life of the person is the person. It gives life to the person. The chayes becomes one with the person and gives life to it. Without the life, the person doesn't have life. So the life doesn't add something additional. It is intrinsically the thing itself now, right? On the time of them is vachayes is the neshama upnimi is from mentioned, and the reason for this is because life is the inner dimension and the neshama and the soul and of the person himself. Und therefore, in an art, wo chayes kommt on, nimmt es durch dem art in ganze. So the life becomes entirely and completely this person now. Und das ist the Eiftu von Chassidus in dem Inyan von Torah mitzvahs, and this is what Chassidus did to Torah mitzvahs. The limit of Torah, who came on mitzvahs, ken sein in einer Eifen as the Yid und the Torah mitzvahs seinen wie zwei Sachen. One can approach, I don't want to put this on anybody, but one can approach Torah and mitzvahs as though the person and the Torah are two separate things. This is a person, and they are engaging in intellectual pursuit with the Torah, and that's what it is. Or they can do mitzvahs, they are themselves, and then there's these ritual practices that my ancestors did, so I continue to do them. You can really do it. You can approach Torah mitzvahs as though you and the Torah mitzvahs are two separate things. Chas v'shalom. Right? Afilu by the limit of Torah was durch them Veret vi mevarer in Tanya a yichud nifla she'en yichud kamoyu v'chule lio is la'achadim v'chule mitten Ebersten. This has been a geya to sein koyach haseichel. So you can the Alter Rebbe points out in the Tanya that a person engages in Torah, right? They become one with the Torah. They become one with Hashem through becoming one with the Torah. And it says that the Torah, there's Hashem, there's Torah and the Yidden, and each of these three pieces work together with there's a kesher between each, there's a knot between each piece of that framework, right? It says in the Gemara and Chagiga at the end that a Talmid Chacham is impervious to the fires of Gehenna, of hell. And how? It's a kol v'chomer we learn out from the salamandra, which is the sheretz. It's this a lizard essentially type of being that is born from a fire. And once it comes out from the fire, it can't be burned by fire. In fact, it says if you were to take the blood of the salamandra and put it on your skin, you would be impervious to fire. And the kol v'chomer is just like the salamandra is impervious to fire because the body is made of fire and they're one with that fire, they're with their being. So too, when a Yid learns Torah, the Torah, as Hashem says, my words are fire. Hashem says that, right? So when we attach ourselves to the Torah, we are making that our body, a Talmid Chacham rather, makes his body fire. And so he's impervious to the fires of Gehenna because they become one with the Torah. So this is what happens. When you learn Torah, when you engage in Torah, you learn it not as some external intellectual pursuit. That's chitzonius. But panemius, right? This is Hashem. And you can connect to Hashem and become one with Hashem through becoming one with the Torah. So Chassidus aber. Chassidus, however, mont beweist die Weg wie azoi jeder ken megala sein panemius and chayes. Und mit panemius is ayid ein zach mit mitzvahs. But Chassidus comes along and demands and shows the person the way to approach Torah and mitzvahs as though they were one with this thing. Why? Because at the core of a Yid is Torah and mitzvahs. A Yid and Torah and mitzvahs are one thing already. That's bepnimius. That's the emes. Right? So das is euch der Hasbara b'derech efsher for was Chassidus is the achana to be as Mashiach. When it's vetnis gala when bepnimius antik, and this is why Chassidus. This goes again to show another way of analyzing the fact that Chassidus is the preparation for the coming of Mashiach, right? Because it's already showing the revelation of Pnimius Atik, the reality, the truth of the Tainug, the divine delight. So alle Madregas und Stahlschluss, Beis Chitzonius Atik, given an art for a Metzias was is Chutz von Atzmusa Yisbarach. Everything that exists within the order of creation that stems from Chitzonius Atik, which remember, that's where all of existence is existing from, stems from until Mashiach comes. Everything up until that point, remember, the distinction was that Chitzonius Atik was taking the divine delight and giving that information over to Arech, which is the beginning of the divine will. So that the will to create, the will for existence. So the divine delight being transferred to the divine will, right, is the first step to an external thing, right? So the whole idea or the possibility for something to exist outside of Hashem, chas v'shalom, exists in every step of existence up until we reach Chitzonius Atik. It's only within Pnimius Atik that there's no division between anything. Everything is Hashem. As he says, und der Riber afilu wenn sie werden es gale in Welt, is es als in an Eufen, as es is nicht scheilo betachlos de Metzias from Welt. It exists in a way where it doesn't negate the reality of the world the way we perceive it. But Pnimius Atik meant the etzem von Elokus, the essence of godliness. Was mitzad im is nita kein art for epis was is chutz im. There's no place to say that there can possibly exist anything outside of Hashem. Und therefore, wenn Pnimius Atik werden es gale in Eulemis, ist es in an Eufen as Welt bemetzies mit Elokus werden kiviyachol ein Zach. It shows that through Pnimius Atik, through the inner aspect of the divine delight, we can see that there's only one thing. As it says, Ein Oid Milvadai, there's nothing else besides him. In dem Chayes ha'adam, was is sich mispashet in Guf seinen Veran zwei Madregas, and the life of a person as it shoots out into and spreads throughout the person's body happens in two ways. The Chayes Klali was balebt im ganzen Guf mit alle seinen Evarim beshave, and the Chayes is nita kein chilukum von ein Ever bis in zweiten. The way the life force gives life to an entire body, all of the organs the same, right? Just the life of a person, right? Without the particulars of this organ and that organ, just the life of the body. And Beis, the Chayes Prati, was his Eis gemasten in jeden Ever leit seine Tchunas, was mit dem Chayes wird der Ekev Sheberegel angerufen, the Malach HaMaves Sheba Adam, wie Baal as the Chayes is nit me Begilui. And then there's the pratistic of the detailed life, right? As it goes into each particular organ, limb, right? Because over there, we're looking at a situation where each thing has its own need, necessities, its own particular amount, right? This example could be, your hand, for example, you write, you can type, you do a lot with your hand. The life that is the dexterity of the hand, that chayas, is different than the chayas of your knee, for example. It's a different type of chayas, each one specific to its delineated area. So v'yesh leimer as the Unterschied zwischen dem chayas ha'chasidis, was is nimshach und is gale geworden durch the Baal Shem Tov, in dem chayas was is nimshach und is gale geworden durch Alten Rebbe. So the difference between the chasidis that was introduced and implemented by the Baal Shem Tov, and that was implemented by the Alter Rebbe, is al derech the chiluk zwischen the zwei Fanam Chayas, we can say is exactly the same as the distinction between the two ways of life being given throughout the body. So the Baal Shem Tov hat megale given a Chayas klali in Torah mitzvahs. The Baal Shem Tov gave Chassidus klalis, right? The general Chassidus. Was bechlalis hat sich das ausgedrückt in dem Inyan von Emunah, and this general Chassidus, this general way of Avodah and this idea of bechlalis, of the generality, is in the way of Emunah, faith, right? In unagam as the koyach Emunah net durch alle koyches and nefesh and po'ul oiv zei in an oifen von chayes was net zei durch den ganzen. So, and the way that this now relates to the koiches of the body, the attributes of the nefesh, of the soul, of the body, exists in a way that it does it completely, right? The Chassidus, the emunah that Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov gives, is one this is the way I operate now. This is my general approach to Hashem is one of being an Oved Hashem, Chassidus. This is what Chassidus is. This emunah, as it says, v'tzadik be'emunasa yichya, that a tzaddik, the righteous, live by their faith. Make this aber nit as the chayas ha'emunah net durch jeden koyach oich mitzad in yoni aprati. That means that this is my general way of life, but it's not that chassidus goes into different aspects differently, right? Nor mitzad the inyan klali from jeden koyach was is verbunden mit the nekudas ha'emunah from der neshama. Rather, this is the way I do it. This is my general approach to the whole thing, right? Und al derech with the chayes klali was ne durch alle Evarim und wer vereinzigt mit ze, is es aber nicht verbunden mit den Indien Praktik von jeder Ever, nar mit den Akuda Klaus von alle Evarim, was ist eine Natel von Gufa Adam. And just like we said by the life, the general life that it just goes and gives life to the whole body, this is the Chassidus of the Baal Shem Tov. It's Klaus. But the Alter Rebbe aber mamshech gewinnen chayes in jeden koyach von der Neshama. But the Alter Rebbe gave a Chassidus that was a life that went through each Aver, tailored and detailed for each specific aspect of the person. Und in jeder Aveda is in Torah mitzvahs euch mit dem Teichen Prati von dem Koyach. Aderach wie der Chayes Prati, was is eis gemosten leiten Inyan Prati von jeder Aver. Just like the life that goes specific to the detail of the person, this organ, that organ, so too the Chassidus of the Alter Rebbe was detailed. It was tailored. It's specific to different aspects of the person's life and different aspects of the person's self, the different koiches of the nefesh, the different attributes of the soul. Was therefore is as verbunden mit Chabad, and this is why it's connected with Chabad. Okay, was Seichel und der Poule von Seichel ist durch Teufel sein, die Praten, Zavos von dem Muskel und in einem Eufen, was sich mislabisch in der Koiches Nefesh und put in sie in an Eufen Pnimi, euch mit dem Teichen Prati von dem Koyach. Chabad, through Chabad, a person is able to be typhus to grasp a concept. They're able to grasp and understand something. And when you can, it's hyperbolic language, but we still have the same, we still use the idea the same way, that by using the intellectual properties, we're able to grasp something and internalize that thing and enclose this thing within ourselves, right? This is what Chabad does. The intellectual capacities. Chabad is Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. Like I was saying before, the three top intellectual aspects of the soul faculties. So Hagam is the Chayes Prati, is the Choira, Nidirik Darga, and Chayes, be the Chayes Klali Varam Aleph. So since we could say that the particular Chayes, the Chayes of detail, is seemingly lower, it's on a lower level than the general Chayes, right? Since we could say like this, is a bagrenitz the Chayes, is oiskemosten leighton aver. If it's tailored, then it's limited, it's smaller, it's been fitted. If it's fitted, it's less, right? There's something less about it. It's detailed, it's been cut. Okay, it's limited in some regard. And Beis, the other way, is the bittul from Evetz and Chayes is nit as a deeper bittul. We can say that it's not deeper. It's not a deeper level of nullification. We bow as the Chayes get on art for an Inyan Aprati from them Aver is aber farana Maila in them Chayes Prati in Chayes Klali, Beis as in them is in him tut sich but because this has now become tailored, it's new. It gives a new form of life to that specific organ. If it gives a life, there's a general chassidus, and that chassidus gives a general life to the person. But then you have pratisdika, you have a detailed manner of that life force. Then every time that life force has been tailored and made to go for a specific prat, a specific detail, then that detail has a new form of this divine energy, right? So das Gufa was Chayes Klali is nit verbunden mit in Inyan Aprati von jede Eber is a beweis as in ihm direkt sich nit euch der Schleimes Chayes Mamish. Was therefore nimmt nit durch euch dem Inyan Aprati von dem Eber. If there was something that was to be gained by the tailoring of that general life force, then we can't say that it's enough to just have that general life force. If there's something a chadash, there's something new, there's something that is a maila, there's some advantage to the detailed chayas, then it's not enough to have the klalistic chayas. So davka in the chayas prati was net durch the evarim mitzad zer inyan aprati und in eifen von chayas was nemt ze durch den ganzen drückt sich aus schlemes chayas mamish. So it's through this delineation, it's through the tailored chayas that we see a shleimus chayas, a completed life. And this is done through Chabad Chassidus. Davke durch dem was the Alter Rebbe hat mamshich gewend im chayas von Chassidus in the pratik koiches hanefesh leit zer teichen hat mamshich gewend b'shleimus teires of Baal Shem Tov. What's happening is he's bringing the completion. If the Baal Shem Tov gave a chayas klalis, then the Alter Rebbe is not doing something new, he's giving new life from the general life. It's a chayas that's specific and tailored, that's taken from the general, right? The general life. And like we said earlier, this is how a person is able to become completely saturated in chassidus, in this divine tainug, the divine delight, the emissary existence, really understanding the connection, having a true, full relationship with Hashem by becoming completely saturated with it, right? I mean, this is wild stuff. So das is euch the kesher zwischen Chai Elul and Parshas Tabei, and this is the connection between Chai Elul and Parshas Tabei. The Chayes Klali from Teres Chassidus Klalis is Naramis in them Indian from Tavai, was main Kanasiv Gimel reinkommen in ganzen in the Aveda from Torah mitzvahs. We could say the Torah's Chassidus Klalis from the Baal Shem Tov is in line with what we says that it says Arayin Kumin in ganzen, to enter the land. Ki Savai means to go completely into the land, right? And then applying that to Torah mitzvahs. Was das is mitzad in the kudas achayas, was Torah's Chassidus get rein in the avodas from Torah mitzvahs, because that's what the whole point is. That Chassidus is supposed to bring life to a person's connection and relationship with Hashem through Torah mitzvahs. Darnach darf men mamshich sein dem chayas klali in the prati hakoiches at atzmam. And this is why it's necessary to then incorporate the chayas prati, the detailed chayas, right? As it says, was das meint, when you've completely planted roots, you've, as Rashi pointed out before, you've inherited and taken the land and settled in the land, and that means to conquer it and to break it up and to separate and divide it throughout the people, right? From Chassidus in a hisyashvus, and this is how you make Chassidus be with you in a way that it's settled in the prati koiches hanefesh, through the detailed tailoring as it pertains to all the aspects of the individual. Was das is durch Torah's Chassidus Chabad, and this is accomplished through Chabad Chassidus. Shkoyach, thanks for coming. I'll start recording. We can hit these questions.